we are at Patterson's Creek now. January 9th, 1864, Company F, now under Captain John Hibbler, received orders to guard a bridge, water station, woodshed, and engine house here at Patterson's Creek. You can kind of see the bridge a little bit downstream there. Captain Hibbler also stationed a small portion of his company at the bridge over the north branch of the Potomac. At the end of January, Confederate General Jubal Early ordered General Thomas Rosser to proceed down the valley of Patterson's Creek to gather cattle and disrupt the B&O Railroad as much as possible. As General Rosser's cavalry made their way down the Patterson's Creek Valley, he detached Major Gilmore and Captain McNeil's commands to scout ahead of the main body. Many of the men wore pieces of uniforms they captured at Petersburg, West Virginia, 2 days earlier. A picket from Company F, 54th Pennsylvania, just arrived at his post along a road about 300 yards from camp when he spotted the horsemen. A very leisurely gait, coupled with the blue uniforms, allowed the guerrillas to approach the picket before he could challenge their arrival. Private A. Charles Leonard later wrote, "Just as the unsuspecting picket was in the act of bringing his musket to a charge, with the challenge, 'Who goes there?' a dozen revolvers were quickly drawn and leveled at his head, with the command, in language more forcible than polite, 'Lay down that gun or die.' And it is needless to say that he did the only thing possible under the circumstances, though even then he thought he was being made the victim of a practical joke." The Confederates captured several other pickets along the Patterson's Creek Road in a similar manner. The rest of Company E busied themselves preparing and eating breakfast when, in a few minutes, the main body came in sight, when with drawn sabers the entire force dashed down on the camp. Private Francis Weiss later wrote to his father a somewhat exaggerated letter claiming, "It came upon us in a sudden dash, but few of us had time to take up our rifles in defense. Captain Hibbler's surprised men ran to their winter quarters along the side of the track to retrieve their weapons and attempted to fight back. A few men in Company F fired at the Confederates from the doors and windows of their huts, and their camp would have been located in that opening just on the other side of Patterson's Creek here. One soldier, Corporal M. Gibbs, fired at Major Gilmore. An unopened pack of cards slowed the bullet. Major Gilmore shot and killed Corporal Gibbs. After a short but desperate struggle, Company F lost 2 men killed and several wounded. One, Private Jacob Farrell, died of his wounds at the end of the month. Captain Hibbler, realizing that further resistance against such odds only meant the annihilation of his entire command, surrendered to Gilmore. Major Gilmore's men immediately cut the telegraph lines and set fire to the railroad bridge in Company F's camp. The guerrillas rifled each man's pockets, then started their prisoners on a long march to a Confederate prison camp. Many of the men ended up incarcerated in Andersonville Prison. The loss of Company F shocked the 54th Pennsylvania, and increasingly bitter, Captain Sutter wrote, "The war is still going on here, and we are still marching on to Richmond by Staunton, and we have been a marching like John Brown's soul since the chapter commenced, and we are all still in a fair way to continue so." For the rest of the month, Colonel Campbell expanded the area around Cumberland under his guard and set out constant patrols. The area around Patterson's Creek remained valuable to the Federals. Colonel Campbell knew his men still needed to guard it, and he sent orders to Company G and the remainder of Company F attached to it back to Patterson's Creek. Aware of what happened earlier, the men warily occupied their assigned positions. Once they arrived and set up camp, the men started working on constructing a new blockhouse to repair the one the Confederates had burned. Thank you for watching this episode of In the Footsteps of the 54th.